there are a few people who were not here last week, whose tests I've not given back. I gave a few people their tests back. At break time, let me know, I can give you your test back. I'm trying to find a text that I received, so. So, how many of you are in the nursing program you'll be entering level 2 next semester? Okay. Shut up. God, it's so bad. So 3 of you, the best instructors for Lab 1535 will be at Rio Rancho. And even though that's a hall, the consensus is that those particular instructors for Lab 1535 are the only instructors worth taking for Lab 1535. I'm just spreading information. Okay? So, Lab 1535, Rio Rancho. So, this was texted from a number of, actually I received 13 different sets of texts today from level 2 students about many things that I will not repeat. And the consensus was about, so for Lab 1535, what is that? You guys know what that is?
It's like prep for clinicals.
Oh, okay, so that's super important then. So they said, they will be so damn thankful for having taken those particular instructors next semester. It's worth driving 50 miles for those particular instructors as opposed to the other ones available. Just saying. Okay? So there, I've given you that information. All right? So, any questions before we go off and do liver disease? I do want to tell you, so this comes home to me, liver diseases. This week, my son, who has Crohn's and is on very, very powerful immunomodulating drug right now, he had his wisdom teeth extracted on Thursday, and thankfully his dentist did antibiotic prophylaxis. But my son developed by Monday evening, they gave him a stiff regimen of opioids for pain. And they told him, you should take all of them. And my son has pain anyway because of Crohn's. So he dutifully did what his dentist told him to do. And on Monday evening, he developed chills. His body started shaking. He actually sent me a picture, and he looked like Vito Corleone from The Godfather Part 1. Okay, and that was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It was 4 days after he had his wisdom teeth extracted. When he talked to the dentist's office, the dentist, and this is a dentist practice, so I want you to hear me. This is a dental practice affiliated with Johns Hopkins Hospital. It's the best hospital in America. Okay? His dentist said, well, it gets worse before it gets better. The rest of us have had wisdom teeth removed, and I mean, they were bad for 2 or 3 days, but by day 4, day 5, you weren't looking like a squirrel storing acorns for the winter. Okay? And he still looked like that. So I had a picture text me. And, so it's yet, told my son the shaking, chills without a fever, no defecation for 4 days or 5 days, and profound pain and pressure in the left flank to try and get his urine stream going. It's normal, he said. He went to the emergency room only after I hollered at him, and his brother, who's in medical school, hollered at him. And he went to Johns Hopkins emergency room, and he was misdiagnosed twice. And I had to get on the phone to say, it's the stupid opioids. Give him something other than opioids to take the pain away. And they wouldn't listen, and so my son went AMA, left, and he just stopped taking the opioids, but I did have him get a blood sample to make sure there was no bacteremia developing, right? So he had some weird organism that was growing, and we addressed that. Bottom line is that they didn't understand something as simple as the kids on opioids. Okay? When we say the opioid crisis, I mean it's actually infinitely dimensional. So Jim, what the hell does it have to do with the liver? Well, the processing of the opioids and the particular very powerful immunosuppressive drug that he's taking all impact the liver. And so he had a high unconjugated bilirubin level. So we'll talk about what that means. I have another son. My sons are boneheads like their father. Okay? I have another son who's in his freshman year at a great college in the Midwest. And he's been burned to midnight oil. I'd love to tell you that it was all for studying, but his sister is in her third year there, and she knows otherwise. Okay? So he developed very, very mono-like symptoms, which of course he hid from us. And so he went to the doctor, and the doctor, they did pull the blood, they pulled some tubes of blood. But the tech noticed, and it's a really astute tech, the tech noticed that his blood turned yellow really quickly. So the doctor listened to the tech. That's a news flash, an exception to the rule. And they tested, and so the next day he found out that it was unconjugated bilirubin. And he has a symptom that manifests itself, a syndrome that manifests itself like I do, because it's autosomal dominant, called Gilbert syndrome. We'll talk about that later. Okay? And then my mom, this is all 1 week, right? So, exactly. They all saved a lot of money knowing somebody who's, medically knowledgeable. So that'll work occasionally. When your relatives and partners and friends are really jonesing, that's the only time they're going to listen to what you have to say. But afterwards, they're feeling, well, you're full of shit. So, my mom's had some weird symptoms. It's just, she lives in Chicago, she's 87. It's just some foot allergies and a resurfacing of shingles. But she's been with 3 different doctors, and so they did ANA titers on her. You've got Sjogren's syndrome, or you might have systemic lupus erythematosus because your ANA titer is 160. I'm here to tell you. Any of you work in a lab, or have worked in a lab? No? So, ANA titers, anybody know what ANAs are? Anti-nuclear antibodies. So you get an ANA titer of 160. And is that significant? Sed rate's normal, C-reactive protein's normal, she's 87, she just has, there's no rash or anything. Does it mean anything? 0. Oh my God, you have to go to a specialist. I spent 15 minutes telling my mom on the drive-in, can you please cancel your stupid appointment with the immunologist? You're fine for crying out loud. You don't need to go. Okay. Why was it high? She got a vitamin B12 injection because she's an 87-year-old woman, and they don't do vitamin B complex absorption so great anymore, right? Okay? So she got a vitamin B12 injection, and that, like 5 days before she got this lab test, and that skewed the liver enzymes, and that skewed the ANA titer. Okay? Everything is context, guys. Seriously. And when I'm telling you, I know that you guys, I know that many of you guys, most of you guys, all of you guys, whatever. I'm not here for popularity contests, I'm not trying to be a jerk either. But I actually really want you guys to understand conceptually, because when you go out and you do work somewhere, most of the people around you, because we live in 2017, soon to be 2018, everything is given in a formulaic, reductionist fashion. Oh, okay, so we do Vanco, we're going to do 400 milligrams at this particular rate. Well, it empowers the patient. What's the patient's metabolic status? How heavy is the patient? Does the patient have any liver or renal issues coming in that we know of? It's all context driven. No one does that anymore, okay? For real. Now, people who are trained as physicians at really great schools and at PAs at really great schools that abuse the shit out of you, and they're like my age and older, we all got worked over. Medical school was not fun. I'm super thrilled that I did it, but it was not fun. They beat us up. We had to learn a lot, and it was taught conceptually so that you couldn't fake knowing, and it wasn't just memorizing a bunch of values, okay? So we're gonna go through the liver stuff, and then I'm probably gonna email you guys on the drive home tonight. I'll probably go through, oh shit, I didn't say this, or I didn't say that. So look for an email, probably, from me in the next 24, 48 hours that says, hey, I want you to know this stuff too, because I think I did a bad job, or I didn't even talk about it, okay? I guarantee you, long after you have forgotten the short Jew on Thursday evenings, and I'm hoping you forget the short Jew on Thursday evenings, you learn conceptually you're going to spot stuff, and you're actually going to be able to help patients in a way that those around you can't. And the patient might not know, and nobody else might not know, but you'll have satisfaction that you spared them unnecessary morbidity or, in some instances, mortality. Bernice?
I actually have. We had a patient that was end-stage COPD that went into heart failure, and I recognized it.
For real?
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, not that he
Yeah,
had
no,
that,
I
but
heard
that
you.
I was able to recognize it.
Right. Exactly. And I appreciate very much you sharing that. And I know that, right, the orientation that most of you guys have is, well, every nurse would understand that. No. Here's the scary part. Not a lot of MDs or PAs.
No, the doctor didn't. He actually got mad because I did the EKG. And I was like, well, he's in stage COPD, so the next thing that probably would go wrong would be his heart. That's why I did the EKG.
You hear that? Okay. So, bless you, Bernice. If I had money on me, I'd give him some right now. But no, I so appreciate that comment. That's what it's about. Okay? Last story, and then dive into liver diseases. So there is this, and I can say it because I'm part Latino, there's this crazy Latina who works over at UNMH, and I love her pieces. I actually bumped into her like 4 weeks ago. I was parking over there by where the administrative buildings are, whatever, right across the street. And I heard, Santo Diego! And I was like, Santo Diego, what? And I turned around, and it was this particular person, and she parked her car, she ran in the middle of the street, and she ran over and hugged me. So listen to me. So I taught her AP 1 and 2, PAPA 1 and 2. She's a flight nurse, and she runs a bunch of the trauma stuff. Okay? She knows her shit. None of the doctors anymore at UNMH argue with her. When this particular nurse opens up her mouth, they listen because she's an advocate. And 9 times out of 10, she right smack on target. Okay? And like Bernice, hey, no, here's what I think might be going on, not stepping on your toes, but I did the EKG, we got this funny little shit going on, right? You guys. So the patient benefited from Bernice really getting it about COPD and the cardiovascular sequelae. That's what it's all about. That's why I do what I do. So I know it's not like a bunch of other Patho 2 classes where you get your little sheet of objectives and you know that's what's going to be on the test and everybody gets an A and then there's a bunch of extra credit that's given. God bless. The people that teach that are sweet people, especially the one, super sweet, okay? The problem is that that particular person, the other people don't have any clinical understanding, and it's academic. There's nothing wrong with that because we're not a clinical program before a nursing program, right? This is just an academic science. But you have to learn it conceptually. If you learn it conceptually, you're flipping get it. okay? So that's why there's this ridiculous chapter on liver diseases, okay? So it averages about 1.5 kilograms, so it's big, okay? It's retroperitoneal, there's nothing draped over it. It's got no, greater or lesser omentum or mesentery over it, it's just there. When you're breathing heavily, you're doming, your diaphragm's going down, sometimes it rubs the liver and it hurts like hell, but that's okay, right? And it's got a bunch of lobes and it takes a bunch of the blood supply. I've said this before, I think. It's hard sometimes when you teach all of it, you remember what you said or didn't say in certain classes. But to me, the liver is like the hypothalamus, they're master organs. Okay? They literally govern everything. So, because it's so important, I presented the liver here in a way that's very different than I have the other stuff with this unit. So we'll look at structure, functions, etc., and then we'll look at pathology, okay? So I don't care about the glycine capsule at all, but I do care about the dual blood supply. So a quarter of the blood that comes in to the liver comes from the celiac trunk, okay? So those that I have in ANP2 lab is weird because on Halloween, we only had half the class show up. I know everybody was busy doing academic things on Halloween evening. And some of the people that were there said, "Oh, Jim, it's nice you came dressed as Frodo." That is. I was like, y'all failed. Okay? But here's the deal, celiac trunk. So we have the thoracic aorta, and then it passes through the foramen for the aorta in the diaphragm. The first humongous trunk that emerges just below the diaphragm is the celiac trunk, okay? And there's a big artery, and it only supplies 25% of the total blood supply that goes to the liver. Where the hell does the rest of the blood come from? The deoxygenated blood from all the digestive organs. That makes sense to you guys? Why is that important? Because the liver decides what's going to happen with everything that came from the digestive system. Yeah?
It's the first trunk coming from what?
The first trunk off of the abdominal aorta. Thank you, Chris. I never finished the sentence. I appreciate it. So it's the first big trunk that emerges off the abdominal aorta just distal to the diaphragm. Okay? So super important. And all the amino acids and the sugars and the emulsified fats, etc., go through, and many of the minerals and vitamins, etc., go to the liver, and the liver decides what's going to happen with them before the deoxygenated blood leaves the liver and enters the inferior vena cava. Okay? So there is the lay of the land. You guys can look at the picture by yourselves. So this represents what I just got through saying. And some of it bears pointing out. So the kidneys obviously don't send their deoxygenated blood into the liver. They don't need to. They wouldn't be doing their job. So look at this. The spleen, why the hell would the spleen be sending its deoxygenated blood into the liver first before it goes into the inferior vena cava? Because what's one of the jobs of the spleen? Decommissioning red blood cells that are aging. And we're going to learn, I mentioned it last week, where the hell does bile come from? Red blood cells that have been decommissioned, okay? So everything pours into the portal vein, and that's important to know. And it's the portal vein that brings the deoxygenated blood into the liver. It does the things that we're going to talk about tonight, and then it jets the blood out via the hepatic veins into the inferior vena cava, okay? I want you to know, superior mesenteric artery, oxygenated blood to the small intestine. Superior mesenteric vein, deoxygenated blood from the small intestine, mostly, okay? Inferior mesenteric artery, oxygenated blood to the colon. Inferior mesenteric vein, deoxygenated blood mostly from the colon, okay? So superior mesenteric means small intestine, basically. Inferior mesenteric means large intestine or colon. Make sense? Okay. Portal circulation. So we're going to see portal hypertension every time you have a sip of alcohol, every time you have simple carbs, every time you have saturated fats or polyunsaturated fats or trans fats. No, dude, I don't eat any trans fats. You know, what other kind of fat are you eating? I don't want to talk about it. Okay, right? So anytime you're eating that stuff, what do? You cause temporary inflammation of the pancreas, and then you potentially slow down the blood in the portal circulation, causing portal hypertension. So we're going to talk tonight, I alluded to that last week, we're going to talk the specifics tonight about that. So what is the portal circulation? Afferent means coming in, right? Efferent means going out. So what is afferent in the liver? We've got the portal veins, we've got the hepatic arteries, and we've got bile ducts. And we're going to take a look. They all form portal triads. That's A&P2 stuff, but I'm going to show you them, okay? And the blood, so do I have a picture? Pictures are better. So, go to a picture. This is a portal triad. What's a portal triad? Well, there's a bile duct, there's a portal vein, and there's a hepatic artery. Oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood, and tubes for bile. Make sense? Okay. And what do? So the blood comes in, and then it goes into these things that we have up here called sinusoids. Okay? Sinusoids are like warehouse rooms, like Amazon warehouse rooms, all right? And deoxygenated blood goes in there. The sinusoids are lined with macrophages, but as hopefully you guys learned in other classes, macrophages have different names depending upon where they're located. So the macrophages in the liver are called Kupffer cells. Okay? And what do? So listen, we only have 2 organs that do detox. Okay? That detox drugs and other toxic substances. Yes, we have lysosomes and we have smooth endoplasmic reticula in other cells, but the 2 organs that clear, and for healthcare, they clear drugs. We have either renal clearance, kidneys, that's the next unit, or we have hepatic clearance, that's liver, that's this unit, right? So the hepatocytes do it, but first we have sinusoids that pool the deoxygenated blood. We've got macrophages that gobble up stuff that doesn't belong. Make sense? Okay. So, portal triad, and then ultimately everything goes through this weird, it's a hexagonal prism. That's the functional unit, the functional structure inside the liver. Anytime nature does something that's symmetric, I know it tweaks me out. I pay attention, right? So why would there be hexagonal prisms that have, at each of the prisms that have portal triads? Maximum absorption. Maximum surface area allows the liver to maximize what it does, okay? And since my favorite number is 666, that's just music to me, all right? All right, it's a digestive organ. So what does it do? It's a digestive organ. Bile salt for fat digestion. Jim, you said, right, I purposely put it there. Bile does not digest fats, damn it. It emulsifies them, okay? Here's the deal. I'm absolutely going to test you guys on that. Test next week, exactly, okay? Yikes. I am toying in my infinite grace and old age about maybe giving you, we'll see, giving you guys some extra credit if I do give you guys extra credit on the test, I'm not gonna email it to you ahead of time this time. Okay? If I do decide to give it to you. But you guys see, the stuff that I ask is pretty fundamental. You hear me? Know the fundamentals, that's all I'm saying. Okay? So, bile does what? It emulsifies fats. So the liver emulsifies fats. It also ships them out, determines that they're going to get shipped out. It also determines what needs to be processed in the fats or just stored. Okay. It also determines the same thing for carbs and for proteins. Wait, the liver? Yes. You eat terrible, you're affecting your liver also. Okay. When we talk about diabetes, so many people think, and that's the last unit, right? When we talk about diabetes, so many people only think pancreas. Well, no. The liver is another organ that a person basically can trash eat if you become a type 2 diabetic, okay? And guess what other things the liver does? It processes and stores some vitamins and some minerals, okay? It's an endocrine organ. What? Yeah, if it's the master organ figuring out what the hell to do with fats, proteins, and carbs, part of the way it does that is with hormones. And we're not going to talk about what those hormones are, but that's what it is, okay? But it also metabolizes some hormones, like what? Glucocorticoids. Wait, Jim, you mean that prednisone might be hepatically cleared? Huh, interesting, okay? What about mineralocorticoids? Like what? Aldosterone. Make sense to you guys? And then sex hormones. So what are those? It's not just estrogens and testosterone. It's also the generic androgens that are the intermediary for lots of other hormones in the body. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So, for those who are interested in, hey, if I eat a lot of soy derivative products, how come, especially in women, the soy derivative products can jack the estrogen? Part of the reason why is because they're involved in impairing some of the liver function. Okay? So I shouldn't eat soy derivative products? It's America. Do whatever the hell you want to do. Okay? It's also a hematologic organ. Now that's interesting. First of all, for it to do everything that it does, and it's 1.5 kilograms in weight, right, we saw the portal triads. 2/3 of the triads are blood vessels, hepatic arteries, right, and then the veins. So that means there's a hell of a lot of blood that's inside the liver. When somebody has a car accident, or somebody has any kind of a trauma, and the back or the abdomen or the sides are, it's thought, remotely implicated, you have to actually take it very seriously that the patient could bleed to death if there was an avulsion, okay? It also removes bilirubin from the bloodstream. I'll have a lot to say about that shortly, okay? In a pinch, in certain disease states, the liver can even become a hematopoietic organ. Wait, you're joking, right? No, I'm not joking, okay? Like what states? I only have 2 hours and 15 minutes to talk to you guys tonight. I can't tell you about that stuff, okay? And where do we make all of those clotting factors that those who had me for Patho 1 loved having to learn about? Yeah, they all get made in the liver, okay? Oh, it's an excretory organ. So we have this when we eat nucleotides. So every time you eat anything that was living, so I'm not a pantheist, don't email me weird shit about that. But even plants were living, and I mean only in the organic substance kind of way, not in the spiritual way, all right? So even plants were living, well, plants also have genetic material, right? So anything that has genetic material has nitrogenous containing products, right? All right, or components. What about protein? Well, they're made up of amino acids. So that's nitrogen, right? As it turns out, nitrogen is important, but it's also extremely harmful to the human body, all right? So what do? We all know that we excrete this molecule. Hopefully, that's all that we're making, and that's urea. Urea is benign. It doesn't do anything bad unless it crystallizes and you get kidneys that are fed. That's another day. Not sure. Okay. Bottom line is though that urea is nitrogen complexed into a chemically inert molecule. We know we get rid of urea, it's renally cleared, right? It's not made in the kidneys, it's actually made in the liver. So for those people who, oh yeah, dude, my trainer told me I'm supposed to eat protein every 2 hours. It's called protein gorging. You actually, besides all the other crap that you do, you harm your liver, because it's your liver that's got to process all that ammonia. Okay, does that make sense to you guys? Right. So, dude, I'm going to go run 3.5 miles, and I'm going to eat a 20-gram protein bar before I do that. If you do that regularly, you're going to put weight on because you don't need to eat a damn thing to run 3.5 miles. Okay? And you shouldn't put anything in your stomach before you exercise. Anyway, what about pre-workout? You don't need to put anything in your stomach before you work out. And why is that? Because if you put something in your stomach, you literally train your body to look for the calories from your stomach and not from the other storage places in our body. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? All right. So, it's an excretory organ because it excretes bile, and the liver actually makes cholesterol. Every single steroid hormone that is made in our body starts as cholesterol. Liver makes cholesterol. Cholesterol is also an integral component of the phospholipid bilayer for almost every single cell in the body. Okay? So we need cholesterol. So I can eat eggs. I didn't say that. Okay? We run into trouble. So when you go to Santa Ana, all you can eat seafood. Oh my God, he's starting again. All right. And obviously, it gets rid of, like the kidneys, it detoxes certain molecules and gets rid of them. Not sure about that. So, anytime there's a problem with the liver, okay? So, anytime there is a problem with the liver, what happens? Usually a little bit of jaundice, even if it's temporary, okay? So what does that mean? Well, hepatocellular failure, hepatocytes, they're just the cells of the liver, okay? So hepatocytes, that just means liver cells. When they're injured, so this doesn't, hepatocellular failure doesn't mean some disastrous disease. It could be. It could also just be a mild temporary insult, right? So whenever that happens, one of the initial implications is that there's a little bit of yellowish green of the skin, okay? Why? Because bile comes out. It's not processed correctly, okay? And we'll look at the bile mechanism. Muscle wasting, where does that come from? Well, muscle wasting, where does that come from? Easy. What are muscles made of? Protein, right? So if the liver's not working properly, it thinks it's got to harness, the body thinks it's got to harness protein from some other source, so you get muscle consumption. Ascites, well, we're going to look at this, but anytime there's a problem with the liver, there's also potential for portal hypertension. That's just high pressure in the portal veins, which means what? You guys all know what that means now. That means it keeps the blood out from the liver so that it enters into the liver more slowly. And anytime there is a reduction in the speed of blood transit, there's a potential that water leaks out of the vessels. Make sense? Okay? So when somebody's having liver issues, whether it's a primary problem or a secondary problem, they usually develop a little bit of ascites if it's a serious or longer standing liver problem. And then of course, impaired absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, well, hell yeah, because what makes The bile that emulsifies the fats, the liver does, okay? So you got some liver problems, you have some problems finding the enough bile to emulsify this stuff. What happens if you don't have enough vitamin D? We call that osteomalacia, right? I don't know how it's possible in otherwise healthy people, but in the last 2 weeks, I've had almost a dozen students, maybe 10 students in all my classes tell me, hey, just was recently diagnosed as being profoundly vitamin D deficient, and they don't have serious disease processes. And of course, they ask the question, do you ever go outside? And they all kind of like look down. It's like, in New Mexico? Okay. So, also, if somebody has some weird blood clotting problems, oh my God, they've got some disastrous disease. No, it might just be some temporary problem with the liver. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah.
Back to the vitamin D in the sunshine. How much surface area of your body do you need to have exposed? I mean, is your hand enough, an arm, or more?
It's relative. Okay? It's just relative. I've got a big forehead that's not covered anymore. I'm thinking that's my vitamin D receptor. Okay?
Because I have celiac disease,
Right.
I'm chronically deficient. And I
Right,
have
so
to
so
take
no,
on-
so you have to take it.
Yeah, I
You
do.
have to
I
take it.
take 5,000 IUs every day.
Right, which is not actually that disastrously bad. So that's good. So you only take it if you have a deficiency for a justifiable, laboratory confirmed, empirically verified, physician concluded. Okay, it's got to be, yeah.
So when babies are born with novels, what?
I'm gonna get to that. Almost always, so 90% of, that's a good question, 95% of the time, it's totally benign. Just need a few days, sometimes at most a few weeks for the liver to mature enough along with the rest of the body, catch up with the rest of the body to be able to do its job. So jaundice in an infant is actually relatively common, and believe it or not, especially in people groups that have darker skin. And so I know I don't have darker skin, but all my people did. My dad was super dark. My mom's like pasty, but she's old now. But my mom had deep, dark, olive, bronze complexion. And so every one of my children, all 5 of my kids, all looked like they had jaundice when they were the first week or 2 or 3. Not a big deal, it just takes a while for the liver to catch up. So, what are other clinical manifestations? So we said it does all these things, right? So what does it do? Well, it governs sugar metabolism. Yeah, the pancreas does its job, and we'll talk about that at greater length when we get to the very last unit, in terms of insulin and glucagon, but at the end of the day, it's the liver that's determining what the load is and what needs to be done. So if you have a liver problem, sometimes the only giveaway that something is going on with the liver, even if you don't get the jaundice, is that you either are hypo or hyperglycemic, okay? Obviously, inadequate protein metabolism, you don't make the clotting factors, but pause. Oh God, what if somebody, sometimes the very first hepatocellular failure patient that I remember ever seeing and treating, ever, the only giveaway is a perfectly otherwise healthy guy in his like late 20s or early 30s, well, appeared healthy, no jaundice at all whatsoever, but he had systemic edema, no cardiovascular issues, nothing, no history of anything. So systemic edema, the first thing you think of is, oh my God, something's messed up with the liver. And lo and behold, the roids he was putting in his body to get so big had actually, along with the protein gorging, he actually had to have half of his liver resected, okay? So, and he wasn't jaundiced at all, he just had edema. Why do you have edema? Because you don't have enough oncotic pressure in the blood vessels. What's the number one agent for oncotic pressure in the blood vessels? Albumin. Yeah.
So would it also be safe to say that he wasn't processing enough protein to keep his cells from leaking water?
Correct.
Okay.
100% on target, Chris, exactly. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? So the big issue here, you need albumin to keep the water in the blood vessels, right? So, impaired processing of hormones. Well, we said it processed hormones, so one of the things that it does is it processes estrogen. Guys have estrogen, just like women do, different amounts though, obviously, okay? So when a male has hepatocellular failure for whatever sets of reasons, they may get gynecomastia. Not all gynecomastia is related to hepatocellular failure, obviously, okay? There may be impotence, and I'm here to tell you, for those who don't give a crap about pushing your hemoglobin A1C levels to new Olympic levels, one of the things that, so we have all these drugs, Cialis and Viagra, right, and all these commercials during every sporting event on TV for erectile dysfunction. Erectile dysfunction is actually a cardiovascular problem. What? Yeah, it's actually a cardiovascular problem. It means there's poor perfusion. So who are the people that tend to have erectile dysfunction? Diabetics. Okay? So one of the things that I've learned to say in prevention seminars, you're talking to a bunch of guys, and so I'm going to tell you today how you can get to the point where you're not able to have an erection. And that's impotence. And guess what? You get a release of tension. And then you say, what's your hemoglobin A1C? And then they test it, right? Serious guys, you mess with your liver. If you have diabetes, you're messing with your liver. Okay? Another thing is female hair distribution. There are a bunch of reasons why a male can have female hair distribution, but that might be the only tip-off that there's something wrong with that patient's liver. Okay? For women, irregular menses, if it's during the reproductive years, palmar erythema or erythema. So there are a lot of reasons why people get palmar erythema. If you're talking to somebody who's like me, quadruple A to the 10th power personality, they're constantly moving their hands or whatever, no big deal. But if it's somebody who isn't like that, and you observe them, and you let them do their thing for 15 minutes, a half hour, you look at other systems, you ask them other questions, and then you turn their palms up and you take a look at their palms. If there's palmar erythema and it's a female, and there's other symptomatology, it might be a liver issue, okay? Spider telangiectasia is one of those spider veins, okay? Here's the deal. You chose healthcare, guys, right? You're gonna be on your feet all day. So you're gonna get spider veins, guaranteed, and it has nothing to do with your liver, okay? Context drives the meaning of things. Yes, you can get dyslipidemias. That's obviously the case. There are some people who go for a blood test, and all of a sudden, you're sitting there, and that healthcare provider tells you, you have a very sky-high triglyceride level. And you want to say, well, it must be some hepatocellular failure. Well, what are you eating? Right? Wait, what we eat regularly can cause hepatocellular failure? You got it. Okay? So, when I got done working on Halloween evening, I had to go pick up a human daughter, who, we like Day of the Dead in a big way. That's today. But it seemed like the thing to do to celebrate in some weird way. My daughter said, Dad, can we please, and she's never asked for this before. So I figured she asked for this, I'm going to give it. And she said, how about some cheese fries from Sonic? Carbs and crazy fats. Holy shit.
Class, you didn't have an order car.
What was that?
I said, in class, you didn't have an order car.
Right, that's good, right, man. She's a family semester. No, so, I mean, she dances, and they have a big production, and so she dances like quite literally 5-6 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so and she's 16, whatever, I'm gonna get her some cheese fries and Sonic. Everybody and their mother-in-law was at that particular Sonic, including quite literally about half a dozen of my former students. And they came out of their cars as I was in the drive-up, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing here, Gemma?" "It's for my daughter." "Sure it is." I've actually never been to Sonic before. I looked at their menu, and I passed the cheese fries to my daughter, and I said, "Please don't give me any." Wow.
But you wanted you to
the
taste
cheese-
one.
But you wanted.
Did you taste
What was
one?
that?
Is that what you wanted?
You know what? So I tasted. I had a forkful when I got home. And I don't use salt. I had a forkful when I got home, and the cheese alone was like a year's supply, Mariah, of salt. I was just like, oh my god. And so I know I'm ruining everybody's evening, but you know what? You guys got used to that shit and think it's good. To somebody who doesn't ever eat that stuff, it actually tastes pretty shitty, honestly. And when you take a look at everything that you can get on the menu, dyslipidemia. Here's the deal, guys. You don't know what your body's like. No two humans are the same. You don't know how long or how short, how little or how much you need to eat to actually get some hepatocellular failure. You will get hepatocellular failure if you don't pay attention to what you put in your body. Okay? Sorry. I'm actually not sorry. So, jaundice, what is it? Typical sign of liver disease, don't always get it, and it's just yellowish, greenish staining, and it comes from bilirubin, okay? So, how do you get jaundice? Well, what normally happens is red blood cells get torn apart, right? When they're old, they get torn apart. When they get torn apart, the hemoglobin, the two alpha chains, two beta chains get digested, amino acids get released, and they get used again, not necessarily to make more RBCs, but to do other proteins, right? What do we do with the heme and the iron? Tear it apart, the iron gets jetted, hopefully, to the bones. Some goes to the liver. And then the heme unit, the rest of it gets torn apart, and I want you to know heme oxygenase. Okay, I want you to know that enzyme. It separates the heme unit from the protein, okay? And we tear apart the heme unit, and what emerges is biliverdin, and I'm not going to touch you on biliverdin, but biliverdin gets changed into bilirubin, okay? So, that part of the hemoglobin that binds the oxygen, that contains the iron atom, that's the part that when it gets ripped open, the heme ring gets ripped open, the iron gets whisked away, that gets chemically cleaved and modified into bilirubin. Make sense? That's what I want you to know. Heme oxygenase, and I want you to know that the heme unit gets torn apart, and bilirubin is the end product. Yeah, Chris? Okay. So there are two forms of bilirubin. Okay? There's unconjugated and there's conjugated. So listen to me. So just, you need to know those terms. So now that you need to know those terms, just pause for a second. You're going to see in healthcare, and it's not plain semantics, you're going to see direct and indirect instead of conjugated and unconjugated. That's actually incorrect. Okay? We say indirect is unconjugated, we say direct is conjugated. That's for ease of understanding. People who deal with this stuff, and that's their profession, that's a big mistake. Okay? But we're going to carry that fantasy through for this semester. Unconjugated is indirect, conjugated is direct. Okay? Unconjugated means it's not bound, conjugated means it is bound. The majority of the bilirubin that we have is the bound stuff. Okay? So when my son was recognized as having Gilbert syndrome, when his blood turned yellow quickly, he had a slightly higher unconjugated bilirubin, no big deal. Okay? That's the kind, if it's slightly elevated, not a big deal. It's the conjugated, if that's elevated, that's the big ticket issue. Okay? Make sense to you guys? All right. So, unconjugated, not bound, conjugated, bound. Where does the conjugated stuff get bound? In the liver. Make sense? Okay. So, what happens if bilirubin that's unbound increases too much and is floating around? In fact, what happens if any bilirubin level is high and it's too much? In a neonate, we get this condition called kernicterus. I want you to know that. So why is it that we pay so close attention to jaundice early on? And again, a lot of kids are born jaundiced, no big deal. They get past it after the first several weeks, or with the UV lamp or whatever, it's no problem. If they don't get past it, or if they are really jaundiced, or a liver scan shows a problem, you have to address it right away. And why do you have to address it right away? Because that bilirubin that's unconjugated is actually a very powerful toxin to a neonatal brain, and can actually very seriously harm the neurons. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? All right. So, how does jaundice come about? Well, here we're going to talk about bilirubin that's conjugated, and that's the one that's good when it's doing the right thing and it's not in elevated amounts. And that's the one that we use in the digestive system. Okay? So you got that? Conjugated or bound is the stuff that we use to emulsify fats. Conjugated and unconjugated come about the same way. We're just ripping heme units out of red blood cells and tearing them apart. Make sense to you guys? So we get all bilirubin, whether it's bound or unbound, conjugated or unconjugated, all bilirubin is derived from tearing apart red blood cells. Okay? So, I don't care, Jim, do we have to know about UDP-GT? No, you don't have to know about that. Okay? Thank God. So, bile gets transported through the biliary system and it gets jetted out into the small intestine to do what? Emulsify the fats that we consume. Okay? And what happens? It gets passed through into the large intestine and it gets absorbed by the colon. Wait, what? Most of the bile we make and secrete and use in the digestive tract, most of it gets brought back in to get recirculated and used again. Okay? But Jim, the gallbladder stores bile, and I'm busy storing bile. Why do I need to replenish, the bile? Well, I want you to think about that. We're not supposed to eat that much fat. Good fat or bad fat. Make sense to you guys? Okay. We need it just the way we need carbs and the way we need protein. But we need only what we need, not more than that. Okay? So, urine, part of the reason why urine has the pale yellowish color that it has, and part of the reason why normal, healthy stool smells the way it does and it has the color that it does, is because that's the tiny little bit of the bound bilirubin that we're actually getting rid of. Make sense? Okay. And that's for those who are have nothing better to do on Friday night. Okay. So, how do you get jaundice? There are 3 sets of causes. One, prehepatic. So, conditions that arise before you get to the liver. There are hepatic causes, problems within the liver, and then there are post-hepatic causes, problems outside of the liver after we've been through the liver. Does that make sense to you guys? So we look at them, the three different conceptual sets of causes of jaundice. So prehepatic hemolysis. So if anything that causes premature or excessive red blood cell disintegration is a prehepatic cause. Okay? So like what? Rattlesnake venom or black widow venom. Okay? Make sense to you guys? Right? Ineffective erythropoiesis. What does that mean? You're making red blood cells, but you're not making them the right way, the right shape. So, sickle cell anemia, some beta thalassemia, you name it. There's a whole list of them. Okay? Or you have a patient who's got a little bit of liver disease, but they don't know that they do. Well, like who? Someone who eats a bunch of not so great food during the week. They have some good meals, then they have some not so good meals. They have some healthy snacks, and then they have some not so healthy snacks. Oh, and maybe they occasionally have a glass of that healthy red wine for the heart, okay? With chocolate, because, well, chocolate goes with red wine, right? Okay? So they have mild liver disease and they don't know it. And they got hit. They had an accident, or they fell, or they were, playing some sport, and they got a bruise. And they have a big bruise. The bruise lands up, and what's a big bruise? A hematoma, right? Ultimately, as that bruise gets resorbed, where is the detox and all those cells that need to be decommissioned, where are they going through? They're going through the liver, right? So that also can cause, temporary and mild jaundice. That would be a prehepatic cause. Make sense? Okay. Hepatic causes. Well, hepatic causes, listen, anything, just listen, what can cause, at the end of the day, what can cause jaundice? Anything from tearing apart the heme unit to resorbing it from the large intestine or the small intestine to reuse. Anywhere along the line. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So a hepatic cause, one would be any problem in the liver, that long chain of chemical reactions that you don't have to know that make bilirubin or make bile in the liver. Okay? Take bilirubin and they make bile in the liver. There are a bunch of chemical reactions, you don't need to know them, but you need to know that bile gets made where? In the liver. From what? Bilirubin. There's a bunch of chemical reactions. Anything that causes one or more of those reactions to not function properly, that's a hepatic cause. Okay? Gilbert's syndrome, well, yeah, you should know that. Why? Because people who fast or have, they have a cold, or they get a flu bug or whatever, who have Gilbert syndrome, which is autosomal dominant, they will manifest a slight jaundice, and then it goes away when they're feeling better. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? I don't care about Crigler-Najjar. Though I have to tell you, I never used to talk about Gilbert, even though I know that I have it. I never talked about it. And then 2 summers ago, I taught Patho 1, Patho 2, one right after the other, at Westside. And we overfilled the class. I think there were like 61 students in the Patho 2 class. Yeah, that was crazy. Talking about grading exams was a nightmare. But I had 8 students that had either Gilbert or Crigler-Najjar. They came up afterwards and said, how come we didn't talk about it? I have Gilbert and Crigler-Najjar. So you should know about Gilbert. I don't care about Crigler-Najjar unless somebody here has it, and then you can care about it. Post-hepatic cause. So there's a bunch of stuff that comes post-hepatic causes. Here's what I want you to know. The most common post-hepatic causes are with the bound form. So conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, okay? So there's a bunch of people who take phenothiazines because they need to so they don't develop psychotic symptomatology. Well, those people tend to get jaundice depending upon what drug and how strong of a dose and how often they take it, okay? There are sex hormones in women. So during pregnancy, it's not unusual for some pregnant moms to develop a temporary post-hepatic jaundice, okay? Also, anything that is mechanical in nature, tumor or obstructions, okay? So when you do, so let's say somebody, you're not sure, they're kind of, they look a little yellow, but maybe the lighting's weird, maybe you had a late night, whatever, you can't tell. So what other things do you look for? Do you look for ascites? Is there fluid in the abdomen? Okay? Do they look, and they tell you, I don't understand, I feel full. Okay, you palpate the abdomen. Telangiectasias, spider-based stuff, okay? If somebody says, hey, I've got these veins, these little veins that I have never had before, so listen, you don't automatically say, oh shit, that's a liver thing. You don't even think it. You ask the most obvious question. One, what do you do for a living? No? Oh, I'm in the healthcare profession. You stand a lot on your feet? Yeah. Okay, well, that probably rules out telangiectasias if they're on the lower limbs. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Pulmonary arrhythmia, we talked about that. Gynecomastia, we talked about that. Testicular atrophy, I mean, if you have testicular atrophy in a male who's under 75, you have to ask about testosterone supplementation. Bless you. If you have, you're welcome. If you have somebody who's really overtly muscular, you absolutely, I mean, you should ask it anyway, but you have to ask. Because roid supplementation, is big and strong, causes testicular atrophy, along with a shitload of other very bad things, okay? Hair loss for men. Oh my God, when somebody loses hair, does that mean, like when a guy loses hair, does that mean that they have a liver problem? Not necessarily, especially if it's a pattern that's unique to their family, right? Or if they went through chemotherapy or whatever, all right? So that's not so much a big deal. Central obesity with peripheral muscle wasting. Hey, you're gonna see it if you're dealing with alcoholics, that's what we're talking about. But it doesn't only happen to alcoholics, okay? Yeah.
What about really bad diabetics?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, you better believe it. Absolutely. And actually some not so really bad diabetics, just diabetics who have been diabetics and they don't have it under control and haven't for a while, okay? So, what are you doing? You're looking, always you have to test, there's a liver issue, you have to test, is it alcohol related, okay? Also, what meds is the person on? So is it a drug reaction? And then, is it a malignancy? I'm going to say this, there are primary malignancies which we're going to talk about in the liver. There are not that many. The liver though, because it's the master, like the hypothalamus, the master organ, and it has a lacteal system that delivers fats that are emulsified, and has all the deoxygenated blood that gets delivered to it so it can decide what's going to happen with everything. It's a very popular site for metastasis. So that would be secondary malignancies. Make sense? Okay. So here's what I want you to know about labs. Listen, so the most important thing to know about labs is that you can have somebody who has an outrageously, disastrously bad liver disease and their enzymes are perfectly fine. Okay? You can have somebody who has a slight elevation in some liver enzymes and there's absolutely nothing wrong with them at all. Liver enzymes are funky things, and you can't just look at liver enzymes. You have to look at, you know, what are the blood levels of glucose, hemoglobin A1C, triglycerides, that kind of stuff you have to look at, and then you have to look at clinical context and what other, if they have any other symptomatology they have. Does that make sense to you guys? So now, having said that, I'm going to give you the fast food reductionist 2-second, what I want you to know for the test. And it's a good reference frame, but it's just a reference frame. So, if somebody, bless you, if somebody has an alcohol problem, or they have some sort of toxic, so their liver was detoxing some drug or whatever, okay? Their AST, so you guys should know, aspartate transaminase, is gonna be elevated above the ALT, okay? Much of the time, not always, but much of the time. Sometimes only at the very end, okay? If somebody has cholestasis, and that means what? That the bile sludge isn't moving. Now, this could be for 1,000 different reasons, right? So it could be because of a metastatic cancer, it could be for a bunch of different reasons. What do they have? They have an elevated ALT. Jim, do we need to know what those initials stand for? Yes. I don't think those words, are those words in your slides? ALT is alanine transaminase. Are those on your slides? I think good, thank God. I had meant to do that during break and I thought that it did, so it's always good to discover that you did what you thought you did. So you guys need to know what those represent, okay? Jim, what do those particular enzymes do? There isn't enough time to talk about that, okay? So you run some tests. So I told you, my son has Gilbert syndrome like I do. What do you see? You see slightly elevated, unbound or unconjugated bilirubin. Not a big deal, okay? What happens if you have a gallbladder issue or the biliary tree? There's an issue there. What do you have? You have elevated conjugated bilirubin levels. The bound stuff, that's a problem. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? As a matter of fact, the overwhelming majority of all the bilirubin that there is the conjugated variety. So when that level's up, that means something's up. Okay? What happens when you have cirrhosis of the liver? Everything's elevated. Okay? Now listen, love to test on this. Cirrhosis doesn't just happen to somebody who's drinking. You could have never sipped a single ounce of booze in your life and have cirrhosis of the liver. How does that happen? The same way that you get the gold medal of type 2 diabetes. Okay? Don't care about these. So portal hypertension, I've already talked about that. Slowing up of the circulation. What are the symptoms if somebody has portal hypertension? Anorexia. The last thing they want to do is eat. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? So when you talk to some, I don't mean this in a negative way, when you talk to one of the bums who are panhandling who are drunks, and they've been doing it for a long time, when you talk to them about food, like, no. Get me some muscatel, bro. And then get them the muscatel, right? Oh my God, I can't believe we just said, yeah, I heard me say that. They have anorexia, why? Because they've got serious portal hypertension. They have all kinds of other problems going on with their liver, all right? Varices, I mentioned varices last week. Remember, esophageal varices, but you don't just get them in around the esophagus. They're around the stomach, gastric, and then hemorrhoids. Wait, hemorrhoids or varices? Yeah. All that a varice is a dilated, deoxygenated, blood-carrying blood vessel. Okay? That makes sense to you guys? All right. How the hell do they get dilated? Because the transit time slows down. That's how. Okay? And the other thing that people who have portal hypertension have is they always have some amount of ascites. Okay? It might not even be noticeable to you, but they might say, my abdomen just feels full. I feel like I eat a meal and I get really full really quickly. Don't be neurotic. There's a trillion good benign reasons why that happens also, okay? I have to say that. Don't care about that. So, gastroesophageal varices. Remember last week I talked to you guys about, I gave you the example of my friend who died, celebrating her 50th birthday with her 2 kids, okay? So what happens is you consume alcohol or all the other things that can bring about cirrhosis of the liver, and you get elevated portal hypertension, you develop varices. Where does that damn blood back up to when it's slow going into the liver? The capillary beds around the distal third of the esophagus and the top part of the stomach. Does that make sense to you guys? So that's how we make gastroesophageal varices. And so there's a bunch, I don't care about this, there's a bunch of other places that they can go. And I told you guys last week, they can rupture. When they rupture, the patient bleeds pretty seriously, and it's often very bad, okay? So there is a gastroesophageal varix. That one happens to be inside the lumen of the esophagus. So, and there's, I mean, it could also, all the other capillary beds could also blow it out there. So what happens if it blows? You might actually see the person projectile vomit 3, 4, 5 liters of blood, and then they die. Okay? And that happens. So, woohoo! I'm gonna drink! The Astros won the World Series! Party up! Okay? Yeah, guys, I'm serious, man. This stuff is no laughing matter, for real. Okay? Clinical features. So look at this. This is epidemiology. I want you to know this. Roughly half of everybody who has cirrhosis, listen, roughly half of everybody who has cirrhosis for any reason, it doesn't have to be because of alcohol. It could be because you love Dion's and you love Starbucks fully loaded, sugar, fat containing. I mean, they're delicious, no doubt they're delicious, but oh my God, they're killing you. Okay? Do you mind seeing you at Starbucks? Yeah, I'm one of those people that takes like 15 minutes to order what I'm drinking. Okay? I want no sugar, I want no fat, I want no whipped cream. You know, it was like, why go there? Well, because my wife would kill me if I asked her. So, that's bad, you know. I love coffee. But I mean, seriously guys, that stuff. You don't have to drink booze to get a gastroesophageal varices, okay? Half of all cirrhotic patients develop at least one varix. And almost a third bleed out within 2 years of development. Okay? Didn't say that they die, but a third bleed out. Hopefully it's a small varix. Okay? What determines if the bleed is fatal? How big it is, how long standing it's been, how much tissue is implicated. Okay? So, the main cause of death in people who have long-standing cirrhosis, when somebody dies, when they say, well, Uncle so-and-so, Aunt so-and-so, Grandpa, Grandma, Dad, your partner, whomever, okay? When they say, well, they died from cirrhosis of the liver, there is a 25 to 33% chance that what actually killed them because of cirrhosis was that they bled out. Okay? Guys, man, that's bad. Okay? It's so easy to avoid, right? Eat relatively healthy and don't drink either at all. Oh my God! I'm not a teetotaler, but don't drink that much. Okay? Mortality rates, listen. Not if you develop a varix, but if you bleed. Listen, if you bleed with a varix, there's a 1 in 2 shot you're dying from that bleed. And roughly a third of the people, on average, who have cirrhosis are going to bleed. You do the math. So that means 15% of all the people who have cirrhosis are dying from bleeding out. Answer, that's probably that's probably too small a number. Oh my God, I have a fill in the blank close person who I know has cirrhosis of the liver. Well, ride them to change everything, okay? So, when's the likeliest time that you'll bleed? Within the first 3 days after you've had a bleed. But listen, almost half of all patients we know now who have a bleed are gonna bleed again within a couple months, and then again probably a year or two out. Okay, so I'm not gonna, talk to you about the treatment yet, Chris.
So why is the bleed so severe if it's coming from the capillary beds?
Well, it's also because it's a bunch, so that's a good question. When we say Varix, now you saw, right, when I borrowed from the book, it looked like a horse pill in the esophagus. Yeah, that's a small one.
Okay.
That's what it is. So it's like these really, imagine taking balloons and filling them with water, and you do it slowly, they get bigger, and they get bigger, and they get bigger, and they're lying around, and they get bumped. It's that. Okay, that's a good question.
So it comes out, I'm sorry. So it comes out,
They can come out in any way. So it could come out, you puke it out in the hematemesis, it could come out in the stool, right?
because I've seen a few that have actually died.
Right.
It's just weird.
Right, oh,
It's a nasty.
it's
thing.
nasty, you got it.
It's bad.
You
Like,
got it,
there's
Alicia.
a bunch of blood transfusions, there's a
Yeah.
bunch of all
Twice
kinds of stuff.
in the operating room
It's
for me.
very
Twice.
weird. They're-
Cut them open, because you're gonna work on something else, and all of a sudden, boom, you get hit with 5 liters.
So like they continue to get bigger. So like once you get one, does it always continue to get bigger, or like if you like started being healthy again, would it stop? Like can you stop it, or like is it like after you get it, you're pretty much like screwed? To be honest.
Yeah, that's a perfectly legitimate question. There are many, many, many things that go into answering that question. How old the person, where is the varix or varices, multiple located, do they have any trauma that they had to the region, right? Even if they stop, etc. The one thing that you know is that you don't make things worse by doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But does doing the right thing reverse things? Once you have a varix, you got a varix. Okay? So, you know, don't get the flipping varix. And I know you're not saying for you, Brian. Anemia, yeah, so sometimes you've got somebody that has cirrhosis of the liver and they have no bleeding events, they look like a picture of health, other than they have cirrhosis of the liver. And it's weird how long somebody can appear healthy when they've got underlying liver damage. And it's not because the liver is this resilient organ and you can, screw with it and then it just keeps on regenerating, there's a lot of fairy tales about that stuff, right? It's a very resilient organ, but you don't know how resilient it is till you harm it, all right? And sometimes the only thing that comes back is you have unexplained anemia, consistent anemia, and that's something you have to investigate. So you investigate, you're like, oh my God, you have cirrhosis of the liver, and we're going to do some ultrasounds. Oh my God, you've got some varices, okay? I don't care about treatment. And here's the reason why, because if it blows, there's a very good chance your patient's dying, okay? And there's a bunch of stuff that we can do, and I've been involved in a bunch of it, and you get the patient stabilized, and they go to ICU, and you're monitoring them, and you go into the call room, and you take a nap for like 15 minutes, and then you get up, and all of a sudden the pager goes off, and the patient bled all over ICU. Okay, even after you did all those procedures. So, hepatic encephalopathy. Here's the thing. When your liver doesn't do what it's supposed to do in general, and it starts to not function well, we can get hepatic encephalopathies. Now, the mechanism's not completely understood. Some of it's because of elevated nitrogen levels, elevated ammonia, okay? So we know that, but there's a bunch of other things that go on. If your liver's not doing what the liver's supposed to be doing, toxins don't get cleared, you are creating additional toxins, and they can harm the neurons in your brain. So if you know you're sending stuff north into the cranial vault, and you know it affects the health of neurons, You don't have to memorize anything else about what their cognitive problems, their behavioral problems, right? You have somebody who's completely sweet and kind, and all of a sudden they're talking absolutely crazy stuff, and even violent stuff or whatever, and you know the person for 20, 30, 40 years, that's not who they are. If they've got cirrhosis of the liver, some other hepatocellular failure, that alone could be hepatic encephalopathy. What's the extreme coma that they die from? Okay? So, contributing factors, I only want to point out two things here. The only two takeaways from here is GABA, enhanced activation of GABA. What the hell is GABA? GABA is the main inhibiting neurotransmitter in the brain. Okay? So if you have enhanced activation of GABA, you have lots of inhibition. If you have lots of inhibition, what does that mean? You're not burning enough ATP to renew ATP, your ATP stores go to hell. When ATP stores go to hell, listen, you blow concentration gradients, right? When you blow concentration gradients, what happens? You can get edema. In the neurons in the brain, you betcha. And then what happens is you have increased intracranial pressure. ICP goes up, right? When you have increased ICP, what does that do? That's expanding. Remember the Monroe-Kelly hypothesis for those who had Patho-1 with me? You don't have to know that name, so chill out. When you increase ICP, you are putting pressure on everything that remains. And what else remains? Blood vessels. So as you're increasing tissues size because of edema, you are pushing on blood vessels. You're creating higher pressure so they don't deliver oxygen as quickly and as effectively. You're on your way to brain death. Makes sense? And herniation. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So how about a round of Jägermeister? And then maybe some cheese fries. That's bad, I know. Oh, what's the other thing? The only other thing here is elevated aromatic amino acids. They're false neurotransmitters. Okay? All that means the liver's not doing, it's not processing things like what? Protein. And we have a bunch of amino acids that are aromatic amino acids. If they don't get processed the right way and they actually get released into circulation in the brain, they can act as false neurotransmitters. So you get firing or inhibition when you don't want firing or you don't want inhibition. Does that make sense? Okay. So, dementia, psychotic symptoms, and ultimately coma, that hopefully you don't have to write that stuff down and memorize, that should follow conceptually. Cerebellar or extrapyramidal signs, they can't walk right, they don't have balance, they lose balance. And then we've got this thing called asterisk, I can't pronounce it, liver flat. Okay, I'm not even gonna try. So what happens is, you suspect it in a patient, and these patients are in the hospital or in a long-term facility. And what do? You do your routine physical, and you do extension on the hand. You do my knuckles crack.
I heard that all
You do extension, and you just hold it briefly, and all of a sudden, they do a flap, out of control. Why? Hepatic encephalopathy. What does the cerebellum do? Many things, but it finely tunes and coordinates voluntary action, and you just saw it not do that. Liver problem. Okay? What kinds of people can get hepatic encephalopathy? I don't care about the first two bullet points. Infection can bring it. Use of sedatives. Jim, I can't go to sleep unless you use a sedative. I'm not saying that use a sedative. But people that use sedatives over time usually have to use different and ever increasing dosages and powerful sedatives because we develop that kind of relationship to sedatives, and they can bring about enough liver problems that you get hepatic encephalopathy. Yes?
What about like with the natural, like melatonin? Same thing?
Well, these are specifically, that's a good question, Bernie. So this, it's not so much that you're sedating as much as it is the sedatives, the kinds of sedatives that I'm talking about are hepatically clear. Melatonin isn't.
Okay.
Okay? GI hemorrhage, that should be obvious. Okay? Protein meal gorging. And I know that everybody here is like, no, dude, I don't do that. Well, if you grab a 3 gram or a 5 gram or a 10 gram or a 20 gram bar of protein, which you can buy in all sorts of flavors and taste delicious, unless you're planning on lifting, like, you know, your car or doing that kind of work output, you don't need that kind of protein. Okay? So, and if you don't know, that's okay. And does anybody know roughly for a healthy young adult how many grams of protein you eat per day?
0.8 milligrams of protein per kilogram per day.
You got it. So if you're 50 kilograms, what do you need? You need 40 grams of protein for the day. Okay? That 20 gram bar, you're hungry an hour and a half later, right? So, excellent, that's exactly right. And should you know that? Not for this class, but should you know that as a healthcare provider? You bet you should. Okay? So, eating a meal every 2 hours. Dude, so I had I had salmon and, shark cartilage. And you guys laugh. It's all out there, okay? And then I went and I had a milkshake, I put some, whey extract in there. And I went to Costco and I bought that, $50 thing of organic whey so I could get, guys, people are harming their bodies. You're harming your liver, you're harming your kidneys, and you're potentially generating hepatic encephalopathies. Renal failure obviously causes all kinds of problems, but constipation, right? You have a patient who has had, my son, when I was talking to my son, after 4 or 5 days, he's on opioids. When I was talking to him, obviously he was constipated. And when I was talking to him, his reasoning, probably a really smart kid and goofy. And he was not goofy or smart. And I was like, oh, shit. What exactly did you tell your dentist? And he was like, oh, yeah, dude, it's all good. And he's normally like that, but it was weird. Okay? So was that from the opioids? Yeah. Was he developing temporary hepatic encephalopathies? You bet he was. Why did he get the shakes from the opioids? Part of it was a neurotransmitter thing. Part of it was hepatic encephalopathy. For real? Yeah, for real. They were extrapyramidal cerebellar signs, right? He was getting the shakes. I don't care about this. Treatment, I don't care about treatment for that stuff. Cerebral edema. So, what's the takeaway? If you have the liver not doing certain things, and you have substances that are floating around that shouldn't be floating around, you create osmotic gradients, right? You get edema, we talked about that. I don't care about grade 3 or grade 4. Bottom line is you get cerebral edema, herniations around the corner. If you don't take care of this, it's herniation and death. If you aggressively attack the situation of cerebral edema, there's still a 2/3 probability of the patient. So once you get cerebral edema, it's pretty rapid downhill progression. So don't worry about that. Ascites. So we know about ascites, right? We've talked about it. You have portal hypertension, you get ascites. A lot of times you want to do a paracentesis, and I'm not interested in you guys knowing about doing a paracentesis, but why would you do that? Because you want to sample what's in the fluid, because that may drive how you treat the patient for all kinds of complicated reasons, okay? So, who gets advanced liver disease? Lots of people. Oh my gosh, people who have pancreatitis, right? The chronic kind, you have chronic pancreatitis if you're constantly eating like crap and or drinking, okay? Malignancies, obviously, there's a bunch of other stuff that's on here that you don't need to know, but cardiac failure, that's a big one, okay? We already talked about the cardio unit. If you have cardiac failure, what are you doing? That's massive portal hypertension. Okay, right? The blood's all backed up. Budd-Chiari syndrome, believe it or not, that's actually not that uncommon. But you guys don't have to know it. Portal vein thrombosis. So anything that can cause a thrombosis can cause portal vein thrombosis. Like what? Oh, I don't know. Like birth control medicine. Smoking. Smoking in birth control medicine. Deons and smoking and alcohol in birth control medicine. Okay, what's going on? Don't care about that. That's terrible. So I don't care about spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Isn't it nice? Not fun. Hepatorenal syndrome, don't care about that. Oh, acute viral hepatitis, I care a whole lot about that. Let's take like a 3-minute break and let's dive into hepatitis. Okay? I know. I'm not going to though. I know, exactly.
I couldn't find my keys.
No, be quiet, it's bad. Yes.
Everyone right after me. I gotta go get a drink.
Okay, and 77, and 77. Thank you.
Anissa? Yeah, how you?
Sorry, that's just yeah, like where the range, so I live on range and
It's a good place to start. It's a good cross to start. Okay, no, and I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a good place to start.
Oh, the summer school, normally.
Yeah,
Things go
yeah,
last.
no.
When does the summer semester start, or when does this one end?
And this one here.
This one ends in December.
No, the summer for the summer school.
When does it? I know it starts May 17th. I think that's the week that it starts, and it ends, I believe, in August.
August.
I don't remember the date, but I know it starts like the 17th of May and then it ends like the first or second week of August. Usually before we would start the summer term after the kids, towards the end of May is when it usually starts.
Now, I am trying to figure out this thing for a wedding. The wedding is on the 17th, so I'm hoping that.
You know how you can look it up is if you can look up the classes for the summer term, and if you just like go like to a math class and just click on it, and it says start date and end date for the summer term. Just go to the CNM, and you don't even have to register. Because that's how I did it, because I was trying to figure out when I was trying to work around a family vacation, and we usually do it the day after my daughter gets out of school, and I can't because I actually start summer before she even finishes school this year. So we're gonna have to wait until like October of next year before we can take our trip because of the school schedules.
See, no, I have a wedding date and they just change the wedding date and send it tell me, and I'm like, I just saw it, so let me go in and see what I need to do. This month is gonna be tough.
Well, I think this one's gonna be a little bit easier than the last test. The last one was horrible. It's a lot, but it's more for me. I'm comprehending it more.
They're all grown out.
About which one? Okay, oh, I'm gonna have a lot to say. So I, oh, you
But like,
well, I'm gonna pay attention,
is that like
okay?
too long now?
I am going.
They've grown out. I know, he actually makes me eat healthy, yeah. Like, literally, this morning every day, like, I was like subconsciously stop, like, not eat bad stuff. Like, what am I gonna do?
You eat a little bit less than
Normally would, yeah.
like every once in a while. Ice cream. Obviously.
I ate Fridays.
CNN.
And I have, but you know what, I've never been like, you know, I seldom do every day. I like a little tiny, just.
You just need that little fix.
I'm
I
not,
wonder if these kids trick or treat.
I doubt it,
I bet you they throw like a party or something. Like they don't go trick or treating, they have like a
but we
Halloween.
celebrate every day.
Yes, this is short version. Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, I just think it's just like, oh, I'm like, so sweet, and I'm thinking, I'm like, well, what do you do for Halloween? Like, Christmas Halloween is my favorite holiday, so if I had done this, like, trick or treat, I would be really sad. So like,
Something they
Yes, they collected.
Alright, guys, we are on, slide 77, acute viral hepatitis. Okay? And, listen, hepatitis, unless you say viral hepatitis, all that hepatitis means is inflammation of the liver for whatever reasons, right? So, here we're talking about viral hepatitis. So, there are many things that can cause hepatitis. A lot of people who have hepatitis also have cytomegalovirus and or Epstein-Barr virus. People that get mono tend to get Epstein-Barr and might be predisposed down the line to hepatitis unless they get immunized against Hep B, okay? So this is a very important slide, and I'm going to talk about what's on the slide. All you need to know is what I'm going to say of what's on this slide, because there's a lot of information. You only need to know what I'm going to talk about, okay, from this slide. So, type A and type E are fecal oral route, and they're usually self-limited, and they can be pretty serious, but most of the time people get better right away, and there's nothing chronic about them, okay? Now I'm going to talk more about each of them, but that's the sort of the quick and dirty on those. There are 3 A, C, and E that are single-stranded RNA. So you should know that, okay? Hepatitis D, the only thing I'm going to say about hepatitis D, the only thing is that unless hepatitis B is also present, Hep D can do nothing. So if you're exposed to hepatitis D and not hepatitis B, ain't no thing. Hepatitis D needs hepatitis B for it to do its thing. Does that make sense to you guys? So, A and E, fecal oral route, usually get over it. Never chronic. Hep D, all we care about is that it's going to be with Hep B. If Hep B isn't present, then you don't need to worry about Hep D. And that's all that I would make you responsible for hepatitis D. A, C, and E, ACE. A, C, and E are single-stranded RNA. And then we've got this problematic one, Hep B, which is partially double-stranded DNA. Okay? So, and we're going to look at this. How do you get Hep C? So, it's through the, so why do we say intranasal cocaine use is a risk factor? Because when you're doing a line, odds are pretty good. If it's not the first time you're doing a line, you have blood vessels that bleed, even if it's imperceptibly so. So you roll up the bill, because you know it's cool to do coke, right? And you go down and you accidentally got some blood on that dollar bill. Or maybe you're a high roller, it's a $100 bill. Because that makes a difference, right? No, you guys laugh, I'm telling you seriously. Seen it all, okay? And done a bunch of it. And so what do? Hey, your partner or your buddies or your crew is there. So yeah, dude, you can use my Ben Franklin. And they put it in their nose. And you just gave them Pepsi. Okay? So parenterally, etc. And what's the deal with Hep B? Well, 10% of the people that get it chronically. 80% of the people who get Hep C have it chronically. Even so, wait. I thought you can get cured for hepatitis C. Yeah, about that fairy tale. Once you've got it, you've got it. Okay? What about that drug that's really, that's revolutionary? That's anywhere from $50,000 to $125,000 a month, by the way. Does that, they say they cure, they advertise on TV, they can cure your hepatitis C. There's actually fine print. You don't get cured from the hepatitis C, you become asymptomatic. Oh, right. So, just saying, yes, that.
So would that mean you can still pass it to somebody?
Hell
even
yes.
if they're asymptomatic, because you can still be a carrier, right?
Yep, you got it. The problem with Hep C is once you got Hep C, there are some exceptions, but under most circumstances, you are potentially able to give it to somebody. It depends how you give it though. That's the issue. If you avoid the ways it can be given, then you don't give it. Yeah, Bernice?
How come it's been such a big issue with our generation? They say all the baby boomers should be tested.
So,
You gave blood.
what was that?
Because when they gave blood, they didn't test for it?
Yeah, people that gave blood, and anybody born from 45 to 65. Okay? That would be me. I was 61. I wasn't 45. I want to throw that out there, okay? Because we didn't screen
The mom?
a whole lot. Okay? I can tell you, I know for a fact that when my mom had a C-section to have me, which I cure every year on my birthday, when she had the C-section, I actually talked to the man who did the C-section delivery many years ago now, and he actually said that the sterilization procedures for the equipment used in the OR for C-sections were not remotely what they are the last 20 years. So, right. Make sense to you guys? So that's really the answer, Bernice. So, Hep A, notice you get jaundice with all of these. Well, we already know why. Right upper quadrant pain. Well, you don't have to memorize that. Where the hell's the liver located? Okay. Malaise, anorexia, nausea, that could be just about anything. Low-grade fever, maybe, maybe not. I don't care about that. Fecal oral route, that's important. Usually everything is fine afterwards. Usually. You don't get it chronically. But you can develop a chronic issue, even with something like Hep A. You don't develop Hep A chronically, but you can have, what's one of the things, you get inflammation, right? What happens if you get inflammation in the biliary tree? Well, you might have prolonged inflammation, even if it's only for the 2 to 7 weeks that you have the symptomatology, right? Or that you even have the Hep A active in your body, that causes cholestasis. So if you get cholestasis, that inflammation may take a long time to go down. The other thing is that people that get Hep A, there's a small number of them that tend to have recurring hepatitis infections, okay? So, you guys all know, what's the first immunoglobulin that appears when you are acutely exposed to anything? IgM. IgG is what builds up afterwards, right? So if I said to you guys, hey, we did an analysis and we've got a positive IgM, what does that mean? It's an acute infection. If we have instead HAV, so and sometimes it's HVA, hepatitis A virus immunoglobulin G, what does that mean? That means you had it and you got over it and you developed immunity now, okay? Treatment, for most of these, it's just supportive in general, okay? And you avoid things, listen, alcohol and acetaminophen, why? Well, those are hepatically clean, okay? How do you prevent this? I swear, one of the reasons why everywhere that we go where food is handled, you go to the restroom, it says there's that sign, make sure you wash your hands before returning to work. And when you're as old as I am, you've seen sometimes people not follow what the sign says, okay? And so can they expose you then to hepatitis? Oh, hell yeah, okay? So it's great. And obviously, you could get an immunization, but most people don't get immunized for Hep A, okay? Hep B, big time issue, okay? Infected blood or blood products, parental contact, sexual contact, needles, whatever, okay? So it's life-threatening, and it's got high mortality for a small percentage of people who get it, all right? So we're estimating now there's probably 5 to 7% of the world. There's roughly 7.5 billion people. If it's 7% of the world, round off math, 500 million people have it. Whoa. Yeah, exactly. Okay? That number for America, I'm not testing you on it, but 1 to 1.25 million, probably not the case, probably a lot closer to 2 million now. Okay? And guys, that's really sick, okay? Healthcare settings, risk factors, of course. You guys want to go into healthcare? Well, there are many issues, right? People that get transfusions or get dialysis, super high risk. Acupuncture, what? Jim, you're anti. I'm not anti. Do you get acupuncture? No thanks. It's symptomatic relief, and sometimes it's really great symptomatic relief. I'm just not willing to take the risk. Okay? What about tattooing? Open and shut case. There is. I don't even want to tell you what we suspect in New Mexico might be the incidence percentage-wise of people who go to tattoo parlors to get their tats. And don't ask me, don't email me, I'm not going to say because I don't want to cause hysteria. But it's not like half of 1%. Okay? Extended travel overseas. Why? Did you have to fly far? No, because it's everywhere all over the world. That's why. Okay? And residence in an institution. Well, that could be an extended healthcare stay, right? Assisted living, nursing home, prison. Where's the highest amount of TB and hepatitis B in the world? Russian prisons. Okay? Their health, the sanitary conditions are a disaster there, all right? So, clinical manifestations, incubation, you literally can go potentially a half a year after being exposed to it before it does anything. That's scary. And then what happens? Here's what always happens. Person gets a little bit of jaundice and maybe they get nothing else. And the jaundice goes away after 2 weeks, like it does in almost every hepatitis. And what do? Woohoo! I'm done. It's over. Thank God the jaundice is gone. No, it's just beginning. Okay, the problem is just beginning. So, obviously rashes could be related to anything. Arthralgia and arthritis. I have some arthralgias and arthritis. It's because I'm 56. Okay? Serum sickness, don't care about that. Glomerulonephritis. Oh God, right, hepatitis B can trash your kidneys. Okay? So, I just want to go through these quickly. Okay? There is a surface antigen and there is a core antigen for hepatitis B. If you do a blood test and you only find surface antigen, you don't find core antigen, then it's an early infection. You got it early in. If you find surface antibody and you find no core antigen and no core antibody, so you only find surface antibody, okay? That means the person got it, their body dealt with it, and now they're immune. The next three, if you find somebody has core antigen, or they have core antibody, or they had neither, but during the process of taking care of them, they seroconvert and they have core antibody, listen, antibody, that means it's good, right? Except when it comes to Hep B core antigen. If you've got core antibody, you've got no promise that you're over it. A person can have tons of core antibody and no core antigen and be seriously sick with active chronic Hep B. Okay? And then there's Hep B little e antigen. When that comes back positive, and guys, there are literally 30 different categories, so I'm just doing a few, all right? When you get a positive Hep B antigen, what does that mean? It means you got it, you're infectious, and it's replicating like mad, okay? So Jim, only surface antibody, what you have here, that's the only thing that means that you developed immunity and you're okay? Bingo. So when you do the Hep B vaccine, how old do I have to be to do it? Are you under 75 years of age? Hell yeah, go for it. Okay? The rule of thumb is 64 and under, absolutely do it. Over 65, talk to your healthcare provider, only because you have to make sure you don't have underlying liver pathology before you get the vaccine. And the hepatitis B vaccine that you take one today, you wait a month, you take the next one, and you wait for 6 months after the first one and take the third booster, it's probably the safest vaccination that there is known to humanity. So nobody gets hepatitis B from hepatitis B vaccine. Not possible. Is it possible that you got Hep B vaccine vaccinated 3 or 4 times and you still can't manufacture antibody to the surface antigen? Yes, that's entirely possible. Why? It's very complicated, but you're not at risk. That vaccine doesn't make you get the disease, okay? How do you treat somebody who has active hepatitis B? If it's non-fulminant, it's not taking over the liver and then their body, then it's just supportive. Got to get a lot of rest, got to sleep right, got to eat right, etc. And you kind of wait to see what happens. Can't we give antivirals? Only if it's fulminant. Do the antivirals get rid of it? No, they don't, sadly. Okay? And it's weird, but most people actually spontaneously get over even Hep B. The problem is you don't know if you're one of those people who's going to get spontaneously over it. And since Hep B kills a lot of people, it's good to be vaccinated. Just saying. Okay? So, what if you need to do the treatments? Well, I'm here to tell you, I'm not going to test you on these. Most of the treatments don't really work all that great. There are some that do. Entecavir, I don't know how the hell to pronounce it, I've always called it that. And that works in about 2/3 of the patients, but almost all of these things, interferon alpha, lamivudine, etc., they're all ridiculously expensive. Good luck getting a carrier to authorize it. And even if they authorize it, usually they're not going to authorize a full 48-week protocol because people end up getting all kinds of systemic problems from the drug regimen. And guys, listen, as a rule of thumb, unless there's like a 67 to 70% likelihood the drug's going to work, most carriers nowadays, hey, but it works in 1 out of every 2 patients. that means it's a lot. So you have to argue with the carrier, okay? The other thing is a lot of people can't take what it does to their body for the full 24 to 48 weeks, so they abandon treatment, okay? Immunizations, I talked about that. So are the immunizations effective? If you're obese, not so much. Why? Because you already have underlying liver pathology. Think about that, guys, okay? If you're a smoker, not so much. If you're a guy who's getting older, not that much. You have cirrhosis? Not so much, okay? What about if you have celiac disease? Not that much. It doesn't mean don't get it, the vaccination. It just means you might not benefit as much from it, okay? What about those who are immunosuppressed? Well, obviously not so much, okay? How do you prevent hepatitis B? So if you get a stick, you're working, you get a neonate that's born, there is a protocol that you do. There's a post-inoculation protocol. Why don't they give that to everybody? Because it doesn't always work, and it has some potentially nasty downsides. So you take the risk when it's a neonate, or if you're the healthcare provider who accidentally gets stuck. Okay, now I want to tell you, no, that never happens. I have a student in my Saturday A&P classes who is a surge tech, and she works in an orthopedic service, and there are many of them in Africa. And there is a very skilled orthopedic surgeon who is notorious when he's doing any sort of hand decompressions. He's notorious. You have to work close, and he allows the surge techs to, hold instruments and stuff like that. And he's notorious for accidentally sticking his surge techs. Okay. Yeah. All right. Hep C. So we talked a little bit about it. Bottom line, guys, 3% of the world at least has Hep C. Hey, so what about, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? Yeah, guys. I've done some really incredibly crazy, stupid things in my life that I'm not, there are many that I'm not proud of and I would never discuss. But I've been open with my kids, and so is my wife, because my wife wasn't as crazy as me, but she's crazy, okay? And we've been open with our kids, and it's not about do or don't do, it's about, hey, if you do, and we started from very young, if you do X, Y, and Z, you gotta know, here's what's gonna happen. It's a risk, okay? Now, somehow, miraculously, my wife and I didn't get all this shit that we talk about. I don't know how the hell that happened. Except that my wife's liver is twice the size of normal because she was a heavy drinker for only 4 years. Only 4 years. Okay? In her, from 19 to 23 or 20 to 24. That's it. Okay? And she was super athletic during that whole time and ate really well during that time, too. Right? You pay. You always pay. You never don't pay. Okay? So Hep C, 3% worldwide. Most people that have end-stage liver disease because of cirrhosis in America usually land up succumbing to Hep C. Okay? Now, that might not be what you hear in the hospital, but that's what gets written up because you have to write it up for epidemiological reasons, obviously. Okay? It's the single most common hepatitis, Hep C is, in America, and it's the one that's least responsive to treatment. So, yeah, okay. So, clinical manifestations, so listen guys, it's crazy, you're usually asymptomatic until there's been serious damage with Hep C. The other thing is, what do? You end up doing liver enzyme values, and what do you get? If you chart them, and you do a lot of them, you get wild, undulating fluctuations with no rhyme or reason, okay? You can imagine how the patient feels while that's all going on, right? And there are all kinds of things that can happen. 15% spontaneously resolved, that's good news. What does that mean about the other 85%? Bingo, exactly, okay? And I don't care, I'm not gonna test you guys on these, but listen. So, you can destroy your kidneys if you have hep C, they can get destroyed. Or you can develop polyarteritis nodosa. So what is that? Inflammation of the medium-sized blood vessels that carry oxygenated blood, arterioles, and they develop nodules and scarring. Just the thing you want arteries to develop, right? And those don't go away. All right, I don't care about that. So treatment. Listen, you read, right, or you watch it on TV, we've solved hep C. No, they haven't. And what's the normal treatment? Supportive. You don't do jack after initial diagnosis. Why? Because the body might be able to figure it out. If you don't give the body some time to figure it out, and you start pumping things, like what? Well, the drugs that would work are hepatically cleared. You hear what I'm saying? So what would you do? You put the liver at risk. Oh, you don't want to do that. You want to give the body a chance that might actually end up resolving. What does resolving mean? It doesn't mean you're cured. It means you don't have a detectable load. Does that mean you still have hep C? Hell yeah. Does that mean you can give it to people? Hell yes. Does that mean at some point down the road it can rear its ugly head again? Absolutely. What are the triggers? Not enough time to talk about it. Have to talk to a liver pathologist. Okay? It's that serious and that specific. All right? So treatment. So the more common type, only 45% of the people who have the common type, type 1, have any kind of response, and their response rate's about 2/3. But they drop out because it makes them super sick or they can't afford it. But I thought insurance covers it. Right. I want to tell you something, guys, okay? And I always have access to Grind, and why not, as a teacher? Because nobody else listens to you, right? Because I have a captive audience. Most of us who pay for health insurance and whatever way we pay for it through the exchanges got notices. About 85% of the people got notices that our premiums are going up ridiculously high. Mine actually went up for next year, calculated 400%. And that's the average increase in New Mexico for family policy. Okay? We have no pre-existing anything, nothing. Okay? And we don't ever use our health insurance. Right? There was an article that was carried in CNN, and you know, everybody quickly points at how Fox News lies, and holy crap, do they lie. But New York Times and CNN also lie, just the same. There was an article yesterday, the day before, that said 85% of all the people who have health insurance through the Obamacare, the exchanges, will actually see savings on their premiums for 2018. It's like, you have got to flipping be kidding me. But why are we doing that? Why are they reporting that? Because that's the way they're retaliating at the human, I think, who's in the White House. Okay? And I understand the retaliation, but if you're going to say that he's lying and the Republicans are lying, well, the Democrats have been lying, and oh my God, the Democratic National Convention, we didn't know about the dossier. We didn't know that money that we pay attention to and cut checks, that they went for a dossier on Trump about Russia. Everybody's saying they didn't know. I hate all politicians. Don't believe any of them on either side. Okay? So, do we have insurance coverage for Hep C? No, most people, no way. You're screwed if you get a Hep C diagnosis. Okay? Hep D, don't care about Hep D, talk to you guys about that. Hep E, fecal oral route, and this is the one that you get usually when you travel overseas. And why? Not because people are dirty overseas, but because they don't have the government's, their poverty, right? They don't have the ability to filter the water as effectively as we can here, okay? I don't care about the rest of that.
Is there vaccination for FE?
For what?
Hepatitis E.
D or E? For E, you know what, I think there is, but no one ever takes it, because Hep E's gonna go away. It's not gonna be a problem. Okay.
So I asked, I have a friend of mine going in a Peace Corps to this one country, and some of the people that she's gonna face, it is crazy.
Right. Well, yeah, I hear you. So she needs to do other things, okay?
A lot.
Yes. So listen, if you have chronic hepatitis, does that mean you're sick? Answer, no. You have to have chronic active hepatitis. Sounds like a sexy test question? You betcha. Okay? What does chronic hepatitis mean? It means you've got some low-grade inflammation. Often we call it transaminitis, because of the enzymes that are implicated, or triaditis. So what does that mean? Where's the inflammation? Portal triads. What does that mean? That means it's not destroying the liver proper, it's just destroying the triads. And usually it's not destroying them, they're just inflamed. Does that make sense to you guys? So what do you do with those people? Nothing. They're usually asymptomatic and fine. For how long? Almost always the rest of their lives. Okay? So no progression of liver disease, blah, blah, blah. The only deal is that they get fibrosis. Why? Because if the inflammation resolves, what happens? You get scar tissue. That's it. So what's their risk? They lose a little bit of surface area for the liver to do its job. So chronic hepatitis that isn't chronic active hepatitis, it's all good. I didn't say that means you can't give it to somebody. I'm not addressing that. Of course you can. Okay? What about chronic active hepatitis? I'm testing you guys for sure on this, on the difference between the two. That's inflammation has gone beyond the triads, and now you're destroying bit by bit the liver, and that's what's meant by piecemeal necrosis. Okay? So what do you see? You usually see somebody manifesting what looks like an acute bout of hepatitis, but it isn't. It's just chronic active. How long does it have to be inflamed to have chronic active? Greater than 6 months. Jim, are you going to test us on that? I'm tempted. So I'd know it, okay? What are the complications of chronic active hepatitis? Ultimately, death. Can be. Or just you're super sick, okay? And I don't care about these subgroups at all. I don't care about this. How do you manage it? Immunosuppressive drugs. And that's counterintuitive. Why? Because you want to reduce the inflammation, right? But if the liver is damaged, it's vulnerable when you're immunosuppressed to other organisms impacting it, right? But that's the risk you have to take. Bless you. Biliary cirrhosis, anything that can give you cirrhosis can do cirrhosis of the liver, can give you cirrhosis of any tube coming out of or going into the liver. Okay? So I don't much care about that. Primary sclerosing cholangitis. Hey, it's interesting, but we don't even know about that. Alcoholic fatty liver. Listen, you can have, I'm at least tempted to ask this on a test, you can have alcoholic fatty liver and never had a sip of booze in your life. How can you have alcoholic fatty liver? Guys, listen to me. In chemistry, we learned, that's a hydroxyl group, right? So what kinds of sugars do we have? Aldoses and ketoses, right? Or ketoaldoses. So mannose and glucose and ose, right? Aldehydes and ketones, and they all have at least one or two hydroxyl groups. Those are alcohols. The sugars are alcohols, you got it. Oh, yeah, that's right. So one of the reasons why alcohol is so bad for you is because it's just simple sugar? Yeah, okay? The harder the liquor, the greater simple sugar content, all right? So you can get alcoholic fatty liver by just having lots and lots and lots of carbs, or lots of fats, because fats are what? They're glycerol and carboxylic acids, right? All fats. So I'm not going to touch you on the structure, but here's glycerol. These are hydroxyl groups right there. Glycerol, OL, alcohol, sugar, alcoholic fatty liver. Make sense? Okay. So you can get it also because of putting too much protein, or you're not processing protein. What the hell is a fatty liver? You've put too much of the wrong stuff in, and you've overloaded the hepatocytes, and now you've developed a little bit of hepatocellular failure. What's one of the things that happens? They can't process the fat. So instead of digesting and processing the fat, what happens? It lingers in the hepatocytes. That's fatty liver. Does that make sense to you guys? It's literally that simple, okay? How can you get it? Who gets it? Obviously drugs, alcohol, eating wrong, obesity, diabetes, and any prolonged TPN. Ooh, right? Super big time issue, okay? What are the clinical manifestations? Of course, portal hypertension and some abdominal discomfort. Why? You've got portal hypertension, might actually have a little bit of ascites, maybe even a little bit of edema, depends on how much of your liver's been impacted. But you do some enzyme studies, and I'd love to test on this, and the enzymes come back normal. That doesn't mean you don't have alcoholic fatty liver, okay? In fact, often it takes a whole lot of damage to actually get the enzymes to go up. So what does that mean? If you have really high elevated liver enzymes, that means some serious processes at work. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. How do you treat it? Well, you eat right, and you reduce putting the stuff that harms you in. Make sense? Jim, it can't be that simple. I didn't say that it's simple, and I didn't say that there aren't all sorts of other pharmaceutical things you have to do with the patient. The bottom line is you have to try and get the liver a chance to heal, so you take away the stuff that's harming it, okay? There is this thing called NASH, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. The biggest loser, that program and other programs like that, and New Year's resolutions, those are all begetting NASH. It took a long time to put the weight on, it should take a long time to take the weight off. So non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, what does that mean? That means that it wasn't because of putting alcohol in or fats. What that means is it's usually because you drop. So somebody, listen, if you're like, 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", which is the average height for a male, yeah, I got screwed, okay? If that's the average height for a male in America, and you go by normal BMI indices, not the ones we like, but the ones the healthcare profession says are good, somebody loses 20 pounds in the course of a couple months. You're prone, potentially, to NASH. NASH is potentially, it isn't potentially, NASH tends to be irreversible most of the time, okay? So what happens is you end up screwing your liver, and it becomes fibrotic, and you've lost the capacity to use the liver to do all the wonderful things that it does. So diet pills, which are really just what? Legal amphetamines. Yeah, that's not the right way to lose weight, okay? What about if I can't remember if it's the Pritikin diet or whatever, but what about if I just eat, meat for breakfast, meat for lunch, meat for dinner, or I just have the high protein and the high fat and eliminate all carbs? I have the ketogenic, don't ask me any questions about, right, all that shit. Yeah, you lose weight, guys, and you screw your liver and potentially your cardiovascular system, okay? But you don't understand, I'm taking a trip, or I'm graduating, or I'm getting married, or whatever, and I want to look, okay, be sick. That makes no sense to me at all whatsoever. Okay, so listen, alcoholic hepatitis. Alcoholics binge in larger quantities than usual as a cause, that, guys, that's not the only cause. You guys understand that, right? So if somebody's an alcoholic and they drink, let's see, if they're male and they're an alcoholic and they're drinking 3 beers tonight, and then again a couple times the rest of the week they get home, it's a long day, they have 3 beers. According to healthcare, that's an alcoholic. Okay? Wait, seriously? Yeah, seriously. What about that couple of glasses of wine as a female? Wait, you drank 2 glasses of wine as a female after dinner or as part of dinner? Yeah. You did that more than once in a week? Yeah, I did it twice. That's an alcoholic. Ooh. Got a lot of unhappy people who are really quiet. I don't care. I don't. Okay? So it's not just the person that drinks the 24-pack or the person everybody knows is the wino. So easy to judge somebody else to make ourselves feel good. Well, I spoke to everybody tonight, potentially. Okay? And when you look at the liver cells, it wants you to know if you find Mallory bodies, you're looking at a liver that has problems because of alcohol. So, Jim, does every alcoholic liver have Mallory bodies? No. But if you find Mallory bodies, you know you're looking at an alcoholic liver. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So, what does it look like when somebody has hepatitis from alcoholic reasons? Hepatomegaly. How do you know of hepatomegaly? You go and you get that physical, right? Ooh, it feels big. You usually can't self-palpate unless you know how to self-palpate, and you shouldn't do that anyway because you're going to feel something that's not really there. Okay? But you got a little bit. Listen, if you have hepatomegaly, where does the splenic vein dump its deoxygenated blood? In the freaking liver. Right? It goes into the portal vein. So if you have hepatomegaly, you've got portal hypertension, which means what? The blood's slow getting out of the spleen, which means what? You probably have splenomegaly. Okay, I didn't put it on here, but you probably have some splenomegaly. How do you know if you have splenomegaly? You eat a meal and you can't eat as much as you used to eat. You have a little bit of discomfort on the left side. Yeah, that needs to be evaluated. Okay? Encephalopathies. There are some people that have absolutely no symptomatology other than they used to be super reasonable, and you're talking to them, and it's like, so dude, like, you're not studying anymore for your exams. I don't understand what the hell's going on. You don't understand, Jim. It's, man, I'm telling you, seriously, when Bush was president, dude. What? What? What does that have to do? Oh, can't you see it? Oh, okay, bro, yeah, I can see it all right. I'm serious, guys. It might be something like that. Maybe they're super passionate about politics, but somehow it seems like the cylinder's missing. It's not firing. That might be the only symptom, okay? So, what did I say to you guys? If it's alcohol related, eventually AST is over ALT, okay? So, what do you do with these people? Steroids do what? Why do you always give corticosteroids? To reduce inflammation. Why? Because what's the inflammatory process? It's an immune system process. If you have inflammation, you're going to get scarring, you're destroying the tissue, you want to slow it down, you give steroids. But if they don't stop doing what they're doing, giving the steroid is actually further harming them. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Oh yeah, because where your steroids get processed? In the liver. Okay. Also, vitamin B12 and thiamine, very common deficiencies. So sometimes, and guys, there are specific encephalopathies that are directly related to thiamine, and some related to vitamin B12. Don't have to know any of them. But sometimes you do a panel, a metabolic panel, a sensitive metabolic panel, and you see the person's got like non-existent vitamin B12 or non-existent thiamine. What do? Well, you give them flipping injections of that stuff. You wait for that to start taking effect, and then you do the liver workup. Make sense? Okay. Don't care about that. Don't care about Wilson's disease either. Although I should just say, so it's deposition of copper, it accumulates, okay? Copper accumulates, yeah. You'd be surprised the stuff that people put in that they call healthy in their bodies, okay? Don't care about Wilson's disease. Acetaminophen poisoning. So, my mother-in-law thinks I am the Antichrist, and that's okay because it's a two-way street, okay? So, she's an alcoholic, and she's been an alcoholic for very many years, and she's very abusive as an alcoholic. So, what do alcoholics and people who smoke weed always do? Don't get vaccines for the kids, and you don't give the kids Tylenol. Because they, I watched Oprah. Okay? Listen, Oprah's important in many ways, and there's an amazing, I love Maya Angelou, okay, in a big time way. And there's an amazing interview, it's like an hour YouTube video, I think it's an hour video, where Oprah interviews Maya Angelou, and Maya is an old lady at the time of the interview, and I mean, there's so much wisdom in that lady, I totally love that lady, okay? But Oprah also made billions by having lots of people create controversy on her shows like everybody does, okay? Like The Voice. Oops, did I just say that? Okay. I hate shows like that, so I'm sorry. So Oprah had, when my kids were really small, a doctor who said you should never give Tylenol to neonates, the baby Tylenol, or Tylenol to little kids because it can cause Tylenol poisoning. And it can cause liver problems. So Chris told us correctly what the rate of protein consumption, what we should never exceed. And so I'm here to tell you, let's look at what the rate of acetaminophen poisoning is. So let's say you have a 50 kilogram person, and it's 140 milligrams per kilogram. So make the math, that's 700 milligrams, that's 7 grams, right? I mean, you gotta suck down a flipping bottle. And in fact, that's who gets acetaminophen poisoning, people who attempt to kill themselves by swallowing Tylenol. My mother-in-law called when my kids were small to talk to my wife, and she said, don't let Jim convince you that kids' Tylenol is okay for the kids. And so I grabbed the phone from my wife and I sang, please don't hesitate, always over-medicate. Over and over and over, but pushing it on the telephone. And that did not provide a bridge to heal the relationship. And I'm pretty thankful that that's it. Here's the deal, guys. I'm telling you, seriously, you're going to see so much bullshit. Oh no, we never, well, what, did you give your kid any Tylenol? Or any Motrin, liquid Motrin or ibuprofen or whatever? Oh no. Yeah, Chris.
We had a baby last winter who was traveling through New Mexico. The parents refused to give it Tylenol and it went into febrile seizures and the baby ended up dying.
There you go. Wow, I appreciate you sharing that. Right, so he had to clear up stupidity. Those parents were responsible for killing the kid. Okay? Well, they were just doing it because they wanted to, be careful. No, they weren't. They believed bullshit. Bandwagons. Watch out for bandwagons. Yeah, they were.
So a couple weeks ago, I had to my son to second seizures, but he has them at like 99 degrees. And the nurse in the area told me don't give him Tylenol anyway until 102 because I can't Tylenol. But he's seizing at 99. And she said, well, just put him in the bath. You don't want to, you're going to have to keep giving Tylenol. Don't keep giving him Tylenol at 99. But I did because I didn't want to see him.
Right, so listen. Yeah, so that's a bad nurse. That's a really bad nurse who doesn't know his or her shit, okay? And that's irritating. Guys, acetaminophen in the doses that they say on the bottle, it's kind of like candy, okay? It doesn't really do, Tylenol's not actually even that effective unless it's taken in big doses. Big doses like what? My son, who has Crohn's, can't take ibuprofen, obviously. So what does he take? He takes 500 milligram or 800 milligram tabs of Tylenol, and sometimes he's got to take 2 grams a day. Oh my God, liver poisoning. His liver enzymes are perfect. His liver scans are perfect. At 2 grams a day, yeah, he weighs like 165 pounds. That's nothing. So don't believe the bullshit, guys. And I don't know. I didn't say that. So what happened? Listen, if somebody has had too much acetaminophen, they tend to die. Okay, and it's not, the kind that you give to reduce a fever or whatever, but the kind you take to kill yourself. Okay, the big thing is you have to make it a week. If you make it the week, odds are pretty good you're gonna live. If you don't make it the week, obviously you don't make it the week, you didn't live, right? It's really stupid, sorry, that's dumb. You have to basically go like 7 days, 8 days to have a chance at surviving. I guess that's what I'm saying, okay? And why is that? Because you have to give the body enough time for the liver not to develop toxicity and cause encephalopathies, okay? So, don't care about the treatment. Liver abscess, not on the test. Trauma, guys. The liver's 1.5 kilograms. The deoxygenated blood from almost everything in the abdomen goes to it first before it goes to the inferior vena cava. And it does all the things that it does. So if the liver suffers trauma, you're bleeding big time, right? And all that comes with that then. Does that make sense to you guys? That's the way you remember it. So what kinds of trauma? Any kind of trauma, guys. Doesn't have to be a knife, doesn't have to be a gunshot, doesn't have to be an auto accident. It could literally be a cheerleader at a college football game 2 weeks ago, not for the Lobos, at a different college, far away from here. And, the guy pushed her up, she did her flip, and it's a guy who couldn't catch correctly, and he didn't catch correctly. She broke her leg, and she landed, she broke her leg, and then belly flopped, and she suffered a hepatic emulsion and almost died. Okay? So, yeah. Now, you don't have to know 29% of the body's cardiac output, but that's almost a third, right, guys? Why? Because it does all the things that we said it does at the beginning. Okay, so the liver, so listen, am I going to test you on this shit? Of course I'm going to test you on this stuff. So I need to go over this. Listen, if you suffer trauma to your liver and you bleed, you obviously lost volume in your circulatory system. So your blood pressure goes down, right? And you have some serious pain. Why? You experienced trauma to your liver, right? Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Oy, so malignancy. The only primary liver malignancy I want you guys to know is hepatocellular carcinoma, HCC. And that's this baby, okay? It's often referred to as a hepatoma. It doesn't happen until you get way older, usually. And it happens more in men than it does in women. Now listen to me. We don't know why, but in America, over the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen a trend. People that get hepatitis B, even if it's chronic and not chronic active, and people that get hepatitis C tend to be at far greater risk of hepatocellular carcinoma than other people do, and we don't know why that's the case. Other than, listen, chronic inflammation is potentially the precursor to cancer in general. So if you have Hep B or Hep C, even if it's, quote, under control, you have chronic inflammation. So if you have chronic inflammation, you're at risk to get cancer. Does that make sense to you guys? So it's a primary cancer, which means what? It arises in the liver itself. All other cancers, and that's the majority of cancers that we see in the liver, are metastases. Those are secondary malignancies. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. What are the symptoms of hepatocellular carcinoma? Listen, guys, so anything that the liver does can go to hell, right? So, yeah, there could be hypercalcemia, but most primary malignancies can, in time, create hypercalcemia as a paraneoplastic syndrome, okay? Erythrocytosis, too many red blood cells. Problems with sugar levels, okay? I don't care about finger clubbing. So, the way I want you to think about hepatocellular carcinoma is whatever the liver normally does, all those things we talked about, can be put at risk. Does that make sense? So, what do you do for treatment? You get rid of as much of the liver as you can, but you can't get rid of all of it. Well, I can if I do a liver transplant. Do you think that those people tend to qualify for liver transplants? Usually not. Even, bless you, even if they do, I mean, and some of them have qualified and some of them have had it and they've lived happily ever after, thank God. But that's so not usually what happens. That's like 1 in 10,000, okay, 1 in 100,000. By the time you get the right liver, you're usually, and you have to be immunosuppressed to be able to get the transplant. By the time that happens, with the immunosuppression, the cancer's usually done in. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Nothing on transplantation. Nothing remotely related to transplantation. Other than to tell you that transplantation is just as much politics as what goes on with state budgets and federal budgets. That's all I'm saying. And there are questionnaires that have to be answered, and there are panels of doctors, often of the white, wealthy, aging male variety, who pontificate and make pronouncements completely devoid of any behavioral or anthropological or cultural data. Oh, well, wait, that person needs a liver transplant, and they're a person of color, and they were abusing alcohol. I've sat in those committees. What's their productive life? Like, how are they what's their educational background? They didn't even read the forms. Look at how they were filled out. Wow. Sorry guys, but that's reality. Okay? Talk about connectedness, don't care about that anymore. What about hepatitis with kids? It's the same stuff that it is for adults, only nastier. It's exactly the same stuff, it's just nastier. Ray's syndrome, don't care about it. Alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, don't care about it. Cystic fibrosis, we've talked about it in the respiratory unit. The only thing I have to say about cystic fibrosis in the digestive unit is, listen, what is it? You don't have chloride channels. You don't have chloride channels, water doesn't go the direction it's supposed to go. If water doesn't go the direction it's supposed to go, you have accumulation of sludge, and you get all that comes with that. So, pancreatic insufficiency, of course, because you can't jet out the enzymes in their precursor form. You can't deliver them as quickly as effectively down the pancreatic duct. Why? Not enough fluid in there. Does that make sense? So the pancreas gets sludgy and it starts attacking itself. Intestinal obstruction, same reasons. Gallstone disease, right. The bile is sludgy. It's super sludgy in the body of somebody who's got cystic fibrosis, okay? And then, of course, bile duct obstruction, etc. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Treatment, so always, guys, with cystic fibrosis, you're treating symptomatology and complications. You can't get rid of the problem, okay? Not, at least nowhere near any conceptual ideas as of today, okay? Don't care about xanthomatosis, or Gilbert's, I don't know what I said to you, don't care about that. Inborn errors of metabolism, don't care about that. I'm not purposely, we're not behind it all, it's just too much information. I want you to have this though, because when you get to that pharmacology class in level 2, and you have an instructor teaching you things that are incorrect, and you actually start looking stuff up, you're gonna see what hepatic clearance means and what it doesn't mean, what certain foods and certain disease processes are and what they're not. So I wanted to make sure you guys have that, okay? Don't care about atresias. So, the last category, the last 9 slides of the liver thing. So, I think we only really covered like 120 slides, something like that. Only 120 slides. I know, I'm sorry. As we get older, the liver starts to not do what it was doing very well. So what does that mean? What that means is when you see the old men and women sucking down booze and acting like they're in their late teens and early 20s, they're killing themselves faster. Their bodies simply can't handle it. And I know, Jim, would you, there's a place, it changed its name out in Rio Rancho called, or it used to be called That Damned Bar. Okay. So a friend of mine said to me several years ago, Jim, it's such a really great bar. Okay. I'm not a bar guy, but I've been to my share of them under many weird circumstances. But so I went there, and there's a group of guys twice my size, which is like everything, basically. And they're Harley guys. And a bunch of them were ex-military guys, and I have a lot of respect for that. But they're drinking, and they're drinking, and they're drinking, and it carried over that I got bumped a couple of times. I'm a pretty patient guy, but I do have 2 black belts, and drunk guys are super easy to neutralize. And so one guy actually bumped me like the 3rd time. I was like, dude, can you please just not bump me anymore? And he took his beard and poured it on my shirt. And so things happen.
Did Bonnie find the ball?
What was that? No, I'm not. It's just things happen, whatever. The bottom line is, one of the guys said, you can't possibly be a man because you're not drinking as fast and as much as we are. And guys, listen, some old person drinking lots of booze, it's super bad for their body. It's badder for their body than it is for somebody who's 20. But it's not good for somebody who's 20. So you can imagine what it is for somebody, right? And then they're eating all the unhealthy stuff that they eat. You're literally putting the revolver to your head and playing Russian roulette. It's just a function of time before you go down, okay? The other thing that happens is, because the liver changes, and I'm telling you, you guys are the advocates. Like my friend, that crazy Latina, who is so brilliant at what she does at UNMH. You have somebody who's 60, 70, 80 years old, doesn't matter how big or how small they are. If they're that age, you have to think, wait, this medicine that we're giving them, it's cleared hepatically? Should we really be giving the dose, Dr. So-and-so, that we give somebody who's 30 years younger? Oh yeah, absolutely. It doesn't hurt. Look that shit up, guys, seriously. Why? Because all it takes is 1 or 2 or 3 days in an ICU where you have a lot of drug that's hepatically cleared in a senior citizen, that maybe they should have looked at the patient and thought about the age, that you put that patient into end-stage liver failure because of what you gave them, when they could have lived another 20 years with no problem, okay? Hepatocellular carcinoma, old people get it, okay? And usually it's somebody who had an alcohol issue or viral hepatitis of some kind. And you usually die pretty quickly, okay? I don't care about ischemic hepatitis, about that. Hemochromatosis, but Jim, you said we don't need to know hemochromatosis. You don't, other than what I'm gonna say right now. So you have a woman who's postmenopausal and all of a sudden she's got weird cardiovascular problems and she had none before. Or she's eating well and she continues to eat and suddenly she has diabetes. You absolutely have to think maybe the woman has hemochromatosis, okay? And what is hemochromatosis? Way the hell too much iron in the liver. Does that make sense to you guys? How do you take care of hemochromatosis? My ex-football player neighbor across the street that I spent a lot of time doing some really cool stuff with, is a very, very, very smart man, okay? Except for how he treats his body. And he has hemochromatosis, so he gets blood let literally once a month because of his healthcare provider, and he has to get drained of blood so that because he won't do the other things he should be doing. Okay?
Is that something like a medicine?
No, it's like donating blood. Literally donating blood. And then of course, when he comes back, he opens a bottle of something to celebrate that he's better. Okay? Alcohol abuse, listen, I know that I have beaten the topic into the ground. We actually live in a state that is one of the highest rates of alcohol abuse in the nation, and it's not just amongst one stereotype, guys. It's amongst every kind of people group that there is in this state. New Mexicans love to drink excessively. Alcohol abuse in a senior citizen, they might be completely stone sober, but if they drink for a long time, their body's affected, their liver's affected. And so their liver does things way less effectively at a quicker rate than normal. Make sense? Only other thing. So if the only thing that you do wrong, not morally wrong, dietetically wrong, is you drink a little bit of alcohol. That's the only thing that you do. A couple times a week over a period of 20 or 30 years. Odds are very good that if you did get exposed to hepatitis, your liver probably wouldn't be able to deal with it. On that note, I would love what you think. I will see everybody next week, guys. At 6 sharp, we have the test. 7 hedge questions, not on true false, right? On the back, I will probably give you guys extra credit, but I'm not going to let you know ahead of time what that is. Don't write in the test booklets. The case studies have to be handed in physically to me and typed, not emailed, not handwritten. All right, goodbye. Oh, and I need, thank you, I need papers.